So what can you do as an AT leader, as a emerging leader? You can help make sure that your assigned leaders know who the AT leaders are in your agency and work with them directly to develop and maintain and improve your services. You know, you have complementary roles that we'll be talking about as we go through this presentation today. And you're most powerful when you are collaborating. So don't try to do it all yourself. Become a collaborator with your administrators. These are the kinds of things that you can do to help your administrators begin to take leadership action. You can help them be aware of how AT services are provided in your program. You know, sometimes your services may come from an ESD, or a CISA, I have to think what state I'm in, or some other way. You may not be an employee in that building, or if you are an employee in that district, you may not be in that building. So sometimes they don't really know. They know that you come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or that you're working with those 3rd and 4th grade teachers, but they might not know the exact things you're doing or how your time is spent. You can help them identify their questions about AT use. They may not realize what their questions are because they don't think they have a role. You can collaborate with them to include stakeholders. So you can talk about, well, if we were going to develop this shared vision, who would need to be there and when could we do it? And you can be a real provider of concrete information about who's critical to be in these kinds of discussions. And you can help identify opportunities that they might have for advocating for AT. They may not think about it when they're in their district staff meetings, or they're meeting with other agencies or with other programs in the district, or when they're meeting with parents or your PTA or whatever it might be. So you can really help provide that information. And you can also help identify barriers to collaboration with other parts of the agency and let them know, well, you know, we've been having this problem with being able to have this software on equipment for our students, and it's a problem for us, and this is why. Ask questions. Find out what your administrators know and what they need to know, and be purposeful in your support of them as you help them to grow in this role. Our assigned leaders play a critical role in management, supervision, and advocacy and program improvement. Those are the kinds of things we talked about early on, that research about a change in schools in general have to have those 4 components. And it's really important in terms of assistive technology. I want to talk a little more about them. Only administrators can really ensure equity of access to AT devices and services, because you can provide them. But if you're working in the elementary school and getting students very well set up, learning to use their technology, and they move to the next building and it's no longer used, that's an administrative issue. You can't change that. You also have no authority to tell a teacher that she has to do something or that he has to do something. Only their supervisor can do that. So administrators are a key in the whole structure of getting assistive technology used. You can help manage the equipment and the referrals, but you can't force people to do things. You need administrators who have power to make decisions to make this happen. And management is a critical area. Some of the management tasks include things like reviewing the internal processes and making sure that you have written guidelines for providing AT services. The processes for AT consideration and how you document it, how assess the need for assistive technology and when that's needed, how you make sure that AT is implemented across every setting where it should be. And that kind of equity of access is an administrative management task. They also have the tasks of administering funds, human resources, making planning time available, making in-service time available. That's all administrative, and they need to know what the need is, and that information can come from you. But then in order for them to monitor AT services to ensure they're provided in a cost-effective and efficient manner, they really need to know what's going on in their purview, whatever it might be, a building or a district. I mentioned operating guidelines, and it's really a critical piece to know in your district, what is the process for referral? Suppose I got a job next week as a fourth grade teacher in your district, and a parent asked me for assistive technology for their child. How would I know what to do? Where do I find that out? Is it written somewhere? Is there a description? Now, there's no necessarily right or wrong answers as long as we're within the law, but each district is unique. You have different resources and personnel and facilities and budget and even in the needs of your students. So your description of processes will differ from district to district, but they have to be written somewhere so that the new person knows what to do and doesn't do something illegal in their response. What you most want to know is how to proceed when any of these things happen. When there's a question, and you as an individual can't develop these processes, but you can work with your administrators to make sure that they get written down, that there is some place where a new person in your district finds out how they're supposed to proceed. Armed with that basic kind of information, a supervisor can then begin to answer process questions and make sure they're getting written down, make sure they're getting disseminated so that you will have efficient and equitable services. And only administrators can really support the faculty and staff in using AT to improve a student's education. And I would just want to say support is not just admiration. There's a number of times when I have heard an administrator say, oh, I'll leave all of assistive technology to Susan. She is just wonderful. She knows everything. I never have to do anything about assistive technology. Well, hello. I'm sorry. That's lovely admiration. That's not support. Support equals action. It means that administrator that says, Susan is so knowledgeable. I love working with her because I learn so much when we work together. Hello, that's a whole different response. And that's what we really need in our districts to have good administrative support. I've kind of moved over into supervision now when I talk about some of these support issues, because supervision is an immediate and important role of administrators. They really do assess the staff's knowledge in general. They do their performance evaluations. They look at training needs across staff and look at what can happen. And they really have to have some information about assistive technology and about the needs if they're going to recruit and support individuals who can help implement assistive technology. It's not hard to add a question to our interview process about, say, for 4th and 5th and 6th grade teachers and on up. Well, what do you do if you have a student that's reading 3 or 4 grade levels behind your grade level? What do you do? And look for an answer that at least includes some awareness of technology and assistive technology and how it might be used. Again, the administrator doesn't have to know all of the information, but they can be listening for an informed response. They need to ensure that all staff have their needed understanding of AT to fulfill their role. As an AT service provider, you cannot sufficiently implement assistive technology to make it successful. Research tells us that individuals abandon assistive technology when it doesn't become a useful tool for them. The only way it becomes a useful tool is if it's provided and the setup allows them to use it to complete important tasks in their daily environment. That means the person running that daily environment has to be involved, has to know what they have to do to make sure it's there, to include it in the planning. And that has to be that teacher. It can't be you. So we really need to know that our administrators understand that and look at that when they observe, when they recruit, when they hire, that they demonstrate an interest in making sure that AT is usable. Too many times it's an IEP team does its job and makes a good decision, and then a piece of equipment just sits there on the shelf because it's never used. Well, the supervisor is the only one that can change that. And we need administrators in their supervisory role to understand how important that is, that they need to demonstrate an interest in the assistive technology. If they can ask a question, Oh, I heard Amelia was using text to speech. I'd like to see that when I come through your classroom next week. I can bet you that Amelia will be using her assistive technology that day if that supervisor says that. They can ensure that all who serve a child implement the IEP. To do that, they need to be told sometimes which children in which classrooms or which settings have assistive technology in their IEP and what it is, what they might expect to see if it's being used appropriately. But it's a big missing loop and kind of a black hole. If you never tell the administrator what they should look for, and then the administrator never looks for it, and therefore the teacher doesn't get any feedback about whether they're supposed to be having that available and working or not. And we need to make that happen. And of course, we're hoping for an administrator that will foster an environment with a low level of conflict by bringing people together and talking about things, by having clear expectations and providing a structure that allows people to problem solve and work together. In their role in monitoring staff performance, administrators have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to show that assistive technology is important. They can listen for knowledgeable discussions. They don't have to know how to operate a piece of assistive technology, but they can listen for what teachers are saying to each other. Who's knowledgeable? They can be alert to negative comments and address them. You can say, Bob, yesterday I heard you say, blah, blah, blah. How can I help with that? Because that child's AT is really important and it sounds like you're struggling, so that they can really address it and bring it to the forefront. They can listen to discussions during AT consideration. When we do consideration, does someone suggest assistive technology, or do we just hear it pushed aside? Oh no, he doesn't need assistive technology. He just needs to work harder. Well, an administrator who hears that, or an LEA rep who hears that, needs to take that information and make sure that administrators and leaders are dealing with it to make sure we don't have that kind of an attitude. During classroom observations, they can look for signs that AT is available and being used. And again, if they know to look, then they can do that. They can look for and respond to red flags like cursory AT consideration, no mention of AT when problem solving, or teachers that are totally unaware of what assistive technology is in a child's IEP whom they're serving. So it's interesting because this expectation of the supervisor is absolutely critical. There was some wonderful research, by O'Dwyer a few years ago that was really looking at instructional technology. But what they found was that the expectation of the administrator was more powerful than whether the person was well trained or whether they had access to the technology. They were going to try to use technology if their administrator expected it. And there is a need for training about AT. Ashton Lee and Vega a few years ago found that teachers who receive 40 or more hours of training about AT report that AT is essential to students' daily activities, but that teachers who have not received training report that it's not important and are not confident in identifying and using it with their students. So it's really critical that we do have training, and administrators are the key to getting access to those teachers to provide that training. The final section we called Advocacy and Program Improvement. It's sort of that ongoing look at how's it going and what do we need to tweak to make it better. Administrators have that chance to advocate for AT services and resources at a whole lot of places that you as an AT service provider don't have, whether it's school board meetings, administrative staff meetings, community meetings, different forums, different organizations. If they have AT on their horizon as something that's important, they will recognize that opportunity. When there's a grant being submitted that's going to bring money into your school, they can make sure that AT is included in that grant. They can really help develop and implement and monitor a long-range system-wide plan that includes assistive technology. And they can make sure that you're using research-based program improvement strategies, and that when you adopt those kinds of strategies, assistive technology is included in that. And of course, They're really the ones that can help you do ongoing evaluation of your services. And that's something I recommend that we do on a regular basis. And then integrate AT into your strategic plans, your technology plans, and your other improvement efforts, which we know are always there in our schools. I asked you earlier to think about your administrators and what they might think of AT and whether they realize its importance. And I want you to think about what kinds of data and information should you provide them so that they have that ability to think efficiently, effectively about AT, so they have some knowledge. And that you should also think about what you need from your administrator. How could they help your AT team? How could life be better and more efficient? And how will you communicate with your administrator about student progress? I'm sorry, my words are running off this slide here. I'm very sorry about that. When you report to your administrator, what do you tell them about student progress? What do they know about it? What has been working and what hasn't, and what are you concerned about? And who else in your agency needs to know about the AT team's plans? Who do you report to? If it's just your special ed director and your building principals know nothing about what you're doing and who's using AT and how it's going with that, then you're missing a real opportunity.